All right, so picking up real quick, this one won't be 15 minutes long. We just finished up heartburn. Now let's talk about what happens to food in the digestive system. By this point, it's chyme. It moves through the stomach and out of it into the small intestine. Now, the small intestine is made up of 3 parts, okay, 3 distinct locations. One's called the duodenum. It is this C-shaped part of it that comes right out of the stomach into the duodenum. The largest part is this coil midsection. As food passes through here, it's going to go through all these little coils, all wrapping around. Obviously, this is a lot longer than it looks like in our body. The jejunum. There was some movie with Will Ferrell a few years ago. Hit him in the jejunum. If you remember that or not. Anyway, that's the middle part here. And then the ileum is the final section of the small intestine that leads into the large intestine. So, this is really cool. The inner walls of the small intestine is covered with these projection called villi. The big purpose, the only real purpose of the small intestine is to absorb nutrients. Okay, so think about what we've seen. In the mouth, food is getting chewed up, mixed with saliva. It's starting to break down. It goes through the esophagus, down into the stomach. It really gets broken down there. From there, it's going into the small intestine. Here's where it's going to be absorbed. It's already pretty much broken down. We'll see there are some things that aren't broken down yet. But for the most part of it's broken down. It needs to be absorbed into the bloodstream. Small intestines, as it says here, absorbs 90% of the nutrients from food. So it's getting a whole lot of nutrients from whatever you're eating. But these villi are these finger-like projections that line the entire surface of the small intestine. It increases the surface area of the small intestine and allows these nutrients to be better absorbed. So think about if this was flat along the mucosa of the small intestines. The only places that food would get absorbed is when it hits along the sides. Think about it as flat. As it hits along the side, it gets sucked up and put into the bloodstream. Because of these villi that are like finger-like projections, think about the surface area. As some food comes through here in this chyme, this semi-fluid state, it hits against here, it hits against the sides here, it hits against down here. Oh, it also hits against the bottom part. On every one of these villi, it wraps around all sides, and these are continually absorbing food into the bloodstream from the inside of the small intestine. It is super, super effective. These villi are wonderful at increased surface area and giving more space for food to hit, the chyme to hit, and nutrients to be absorbed. There are digestive enzymes from certain accessory organs, namely like the liver, that are secreted right into the small intestine. It breaks down other fatty foods. We'll look at those when we look at the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. But just know they get secreted into the small intestine. The large intestine. After it goes through the small intestine, food goes through the large intestine. The large intestine main function is removing water, taking water out, pulling it out. Not nearly as long as the small intestine. Hopefully by the time it gets to this point, most of the nutrients, most of the water too, has been pulled out in the small intestine, entered the bloodstream, and carried to all parts of the body, ready to be used by all our tissues and cells. But water, anything that's left here, enters into the large intestine, and it's going to make its way. Peristalsis is going to help it up, of course. It's not gravity doing this. Up and over and down through the large intestine. We'll look at the different parts, and into the rectum, and hopefully out through the anal canal. This, of course, will be on the back side of the body. This is just a perspective from the front. It's going to pull water out and leave solid waste, as we call it, solid waste. What happens to excess water, or liquid waste as we call it, that's for the urinary system. We will see that it gets pulled out here in the large intestine, taken into the bloodstream. From there, it's going to get filtered through the kidneys. We'll learn about that later on. We're only worried about what's left when all the water, or most of the water, gets pulled out and it leaves us in the large intestine, leaves us with that solid waste ready to be excreted or released. All right, there's 3 parts, much like the small intestine, 3 parts of the large intestine: the cecum, the colon, and the rectum. The cecum is this pouch-like area right here that connects with the small intestine. It's where it joins. Okay, so this area and down right here into the beginning of this large section, we call it. Of course, the large intestine earns its name because it's larger in diameter, not because it's lengthwise long. The small intestine is much longer. But it's smaller in diameter. So that's kind of an interesting thing how it got its name. The small intestine, much, much longer, I guess you could think of it as larger in that perspective, but diameter-wise, significantly less than half the diameter of the large one. In the cecum, or in the area of the cecum, is something called the appendix. This is a small pouch that hangs off the cecum. There is no conclusive, it means everybody agrees on it, reason why we have an appendix. And that's interesting. You hear about appendix bursting and things like that. There are ideas out there that the appendix collects toxins or things that pass through small intestines that don't need to stay in the body. Don't know by this point, it's pretty much why is it there anymore. But there's lots of different theories of what the appendix does, but nobody has a conclusive evidence. So some people, evolutionary theorists, says it used to be used for something or another, and then humans have adapted over time. So now it don't really have a reason. I don't know. Look it up. It's very interesting to read. If we had more time, we would certainly look at it. But it's this pouch that hangs off. All it's really good for, getting infected. And, appendicitis, appendix being inflamed, and we have to get it removed. The colon, it's sometimes used interchangeably with large intestine. Some people say, this is your colon. The colon is actually part of the large intestine. It extends up from the cecum, so this area here, across the side, and down the left side of the abdomen here. It's the longest part of the large intestine by far, so I can understand why people call your large intestine the colon. Then you have the rectum. Rectum, heck, dang near killed him. Rectum is where feces, is the end portion here, its feces are stored until they leave the digestive system through the anus as a bowel movement. Okay. The large intestine also contains good bacteria. You might have heard this before, and it is true. It aids in further digesting food. This bacteria that lives inside our large intestine breaks down food and helps some of these nutrients be absorbed. Water is not the only thing that can get absorbed, but these nutrients that may have got through the small intestine gets absorbed here, and that creates gas. So that's why we have flatulence. It's that bacteria's waste products that break down food. And that is the end of our notes. So we made it through the second portion of our notes. Please continue filling your notes, student notes sheet or slide presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to, if you need to email them to me, that's your way of remembering them, do that. I'll answer them Monday in class. Otherwise, just hold them until Monday. We'll make sure we have a little time to take questions and give some suitable answers.